Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. This one's for the moms and the dads out there. Certainly social media can be a scary place for parents when we're thinking about our kids and what they might be seeing or doing, and how do we monitor it all? So that's a good question, because I'm sure your teen has said, don't invade my privacy. So how can you make sure that your teens are staying safe online without overstepping boundaries? Here to help us navigate all that is child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders from the Premier Institute of Living in Hartford. Thank you, Dr. Saunders, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
I think this is murky waters, because as a mom who likes to think that I do all these stories and I'm kind of up on things, I see my kids on Snap all the time, and I really, most of the time, don't know what exactly that they're doing.
I think the hard part about this topic of social media for parents is that we are a generation, sometimes two, we are a generation removed. And the apps that come out and the new things that come out that are ever changing. And so while we as adults are sort of living our lives and managing work and home and relationships and all these other things, there's this whole huge emerging aspect that we don't keep close track of that can change on a dime. And so that's what's scary about it, is that it's something that comes into our radar oftentimes when there's a problem.
Right. And so the things we need to worry about: security, also, you know, there's things that they're locating them on things like Snapmap, and there's also the what they might be seeing. So you say ultimately it's up to parents to decide, but can you settle this? What is the right age to allow our kids to have social media?
So each app is a little different. I think the minimum age is 13. As I said earlier, I had a friend bring Common Sense Media and some of their guidelines to my attention recently, because their 11-year-old was trying to get them to agree to have them be on Snapchat in particular, because of course, you know, the famous quote is, all my friends are doing it. And so but the hard part is there is no age verification. So these apps might, when you start up your profile, might ask you to put in your date of birth, but then all you have to do is, you know, scroll onto a date of birth that's maybe a year or two older than what you actually are, and then you get right in.
Yeah. And so you say it varies by age, but you really don't think developmentally it's the right thing for kids under 13.
Absolutely not, because each social media app is a little different. Like I think for Instagram, it says 14 or 15. So, you know, each one's a little different. The hard part is, so in particular, we were talking about Snapchat. We can talk a little bit more in general about kind of screen time and other electronic media use. But for Snapchat, there's the thing that made it so exciting in the beginning is that it's not like just texting, what many of us adults do. It really is the use of kind of either videos or photos with a caption or with some text box information. But that, and you know, that's what you send, and then it goes away after about 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm. But that's not really gone, right? We need to teach our kids that just because you think it disappeared, everything online can live forever.
Everything online can live forever, and often does live forever. I've worked with young people who, you know, would keep an online journal thinking that it was private for them, and then somehow someone else got access to it. And I have to remind young people all the time, honestly, nothing that you put out online into the World Wide Web is truly private, because other people can get access to it. So with Snapchat in particular, you know, you can send a video or a comment or a picture. And again, you could send something that's kind of risque or very revealing, and think that you're sending it to just the person whom is on the other end, or multiple people if you put it on your story, but other people can get access to it. So some people can take a snapshot of it and then send it to people that you're not connected to. Now the user might get acknowledgement that someone took a picture of it, but at the same time, at that point, there isn't anything you can do about it.
Right.
The picture's gone and it's out there.
And it can be everywhere, and it can really hurt a child. I mean, if it was something that we've had stories where kids have been expelled from school over something they thought no one would see. So it's hard. Let's talk about the teenage brain. And the younger brain. It's hard for them to understand those consequences, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about the teenage brain, what we talk about is planning ability. We talk about judgment. We talk about impulse control. We also talk about like the stress tolerance as well. But with planning ability, and very often teens, we love them dearly, but they're very egocentric and they're very in the moment. So they don't necessarily understand that the things that they do have consequences. I too have worked with teens that that sent maybe either a revealing photo or worse, something that was hurtful about someone else. And then, it circles back to the person that was targeted. And then, if it happens during school time, school authorities get involved. Sometimes parents have to get involved. And so not necessarily having the planning ability and judgment to recognize that things that they do that I think, in all honesty, they believe is innocent in the moment, actually can have some very hurtful consequences.
Yeah. And Snapchat can be really confusing because I think a lot of adults might be on Facebook or Instagram, but we don't know much about Snapchat. I have an account. I'm going to say I don't use it very often. The big thing that you may not be aware of is the Snapmap. Talk about how that raises an issue, not just for the security of knowing where your kid is, but the whole mental health aspect of having a Snapmap.
So that Snapmap feature displays your location in real time. So, I've been with my kids where they can be in a location, say we could go to New York City for a day, and they could look up other people and see who's in New York City also. And again, a lot of these friends that I often use it in quotes, you might have 500 friends. I mean, how many people can you really call a friend? But you might have any number of people that you're connected to that could see your location. And I'm not necessarily saying that people are looking to lurk or come after you, but oftentimes what I worry about for young people is this sense of exclusion. Oh, 3 of my friends are at this they're at the movie theater together and they didn't invite me. So there's a lot of exclusionary components to this that people don't always realize, because sometimes I think you're just doing your activity and you might be forgetting about the fact that people can track where you are. I think my daughter had mentioned that there was something called like ghost tracking, where you can have it, they can see your location over a period of time. So not just your location in the moment, but other places where you've been. So that means that other people are really tracking your whereabouts, whether you think about that or not.
Yeah, I mean, we can remember when we were kids, you might have done some lurking about like, oh, this boy I like works at the subway. I'm going to go check to see if he's working today and hope I don't get noticed. But this is a whole different thing of you could realize, I mean, you see teens bursting into tears because they realize that everybody's at a party and they were left out. And we didn't used to always know that, but now it's in real time.
It's in real time. And again, I think once you're on an app for a while, you just forget about some of the features. You might forget about that it's tracking you. And again, I'd like to believe that not everyone's doing things for the wrong reasons. But there are people that are more vulnerable or sensitive. And so, they might be using apps to see if they're being excluded or to track other people. And so it's just being mindful. What's important in this situation is to have regular conversations with your teens, especially the younger kids, right? Especially the 13, 14, even 15-year-olds, to remind them that, what some of these features are, and to remind them really the amount of time that they might be spending on some of these apps. I call it a time suck, right? I mean, and I think TikTok's a big one for that, right? You just get sucked in over a period of time. You don't realize that it's been an hour and a half and that you've just been scrolling through videos, and you might have homework to do. You might have other things that you need to do. You might need to get to practice. It becomes a real time suck for young people.
I'm interested, as you being the expert in the neuroscience behind this, that I see so many teens, they're all doing their homework with their phone. Oh, here's a math problem. Oh, look, oh, this. I mean, that, I don't know how they can do that, but there's gotta be, that can't be good for you to leave your phone on when you need to have focus time.
So in those situations, if we think about the skills that you need to be even a good or decent student, right? You need attention, you need concentration, you need organization. And unfortunately, what a lot of this multiple piece of information do is they can cause you to be more disorganized. I think what actually phones and electronics have done for our young people have just shortened their attention span. I think it is true. Like individuals with a true ADHD, they generally have a shorter attention span. Oftentimes they do need some additional stimulation in order to help them focus. But I do worry about the fact that we're creating artificial short attention spans where you need to look at this for 2 minutes and then you look at this and then you look at this and then you're back to this. That, if you hear about, okay, well, you need to be in especially when you get to college, right? You're in class for an hour and a half, or you're in a 3-hour class and you might get a break in there. But, young people are like 3 hours. I can't sit in one place for 3 hours without being on my phone and doing other things. So I worry that we're really creating situations that are detrimental overall to some core skills and abilities that our young people need to be successful in any field.
My daughter's going to be 17 now, and I let her have Snapchat earlier than the age of 13 because she was later than some of her friends. I got the PowerPoint presentation, and all my friends have it. Would you have some advice? We should check in with the other parents and see if that's really true. But even if it is, I actually had a conversation with her, and she acknowledges that she probably shouldn't have been on it when she was that young. Now, and I was talking to your daughter who says she actually turned off her Snapmap and she's in college now, and that you kind of get sick of it. So I'm hoping that happens. But what can we do? Because when you're at that age where when the teens are a little older, they really have this sense of privacy. And I don't know, is it okay that we're looking on their phones or telling them what to do all the time or monitoring everything? What's the right way to handle it as a parent with boundaries?
So that's an interesting situation. And I just had a parent say this to me about their just turned 12-year-old because they check their phone regularly, check their text messages or, check what they're doing. And the parent was kind of embarrassed to tell me I actually look at their stuff. I invade their privacy. I said, you should be looking at their things. You should be looking at their text messages. You should be checking in with those things. Now, it doesn't mean you need to review their text messages on a daily basis, but you need to be scrolling and looking to make sure they're not sending images or, worse yet, receiving images that are inappropriate for their age. But, trust is something that's established over time. So you don't trust a 12-year-old to have really good judgment and have really good impulse control. That's something you build over time. And you don't, as I said, you don't need to review every day what their text messages are, but you do need to have kind of an open policy where, when they're younger, you have their passwords, or a lot of the times they have, Face ID also, but they have a password as well. And you do need to check. I mean, obviously, when you get to older teens, 17, 18, 19, and they've had years of showing that they generally have good judgment, they generally, understand some of the security issues or the privacy issues, then you can extend more trust. But certainly with 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, you really need to keep an eye on what they're doing.
And you get a lot of resistance to that. Like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. You're looking at my phone. That's my privacy. So your answer to that?
So my answer to that is that we are learning about a lot of this, social media content at the same time. And it is my job as a parent to supervise what goes on in the same way that I wouldn't necessarily drop you off at a subway stop and expect you to get, to the other side of town or expect you to navigate things for long periods of time without some support and supervision. That as a parent's responsibility is support and supervision. And that's what you're trying to provide in this situation. Now, the teens are not going to agree with that, but that's what you're doing.
Okay, so that's an important part too. So when your teen is stomping off and yelling, or I guess my answer has been, I have to know your passwords, and I pay for the phone, and just like work looks at my phone if they want to. I've used that excuse. I pay for it, so I can look at it. But what you're saying is it's also just because they're a minor, and so we have that right. Do we let them know we're looking at it?
I think it is okay to let them know, again, especially that younger age group, to say, listen, I will be checking your phone intermittently, or I'll be checking, some of your browser history and again, you don't need to necessarily do it every day, but you need to do it on a somewhat regular basis. But you'd be surprised that even when teens are aware that their parents might be checking, they still do a lot of inappropriate things. So that, again, that super ego is not necessarily in their mind that, oh, I shouldn't do this, my parents are checking, because they forget, they get caught up in whatever they're doing, and then boom, the judgment goes out the window. And there's a lot of influence that happens with social media that I think is so important to talk about. Very often on the news, they talk about the latest trends. There's this challenge and that challenge, and kids are doing this, and now other kids are learning about it and doing it. I do those segments all the time,
Yeah.
where I talk about the latest challenge, and this one's dangerous, and people don't realize how dangerous, young people don't realize how dangerous it is, right? These challenges aren't happening to 40-year-olds, that they realize that there's, you put these 3 chemicals in a water bottle, you tighten the lid, and you leave the water bottle for someone to open, and then it explodes on them.
Right.
These are things that our young people are doing because they think it's funny or cool, but they don't realize the implications of what they're doing.
Right. I mean, I remember the challenge of doing something in the bathroom. I forget what it was, but good kids, honor roll students were all participating. They thought it was normal, like this TikTok challenge. Do something in the middle school bathrooms. It was all over the news. And so I guess, everyone's doing it, so it must be okay. We used to say, well, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? But this is a little different because the implications could be so great. So that might be why you're saying, listen, this is the World Wide Web, and I love your analogy of, I wouldn't just drop you off at a subway station and say, figure it out and hope you do okay. And there's
Right.
maybe arguably more dangerous things on the internet than there is at the subway station. So what else do we need to know? You said, actually, one of the things that you sent me in my research was posts like Twitter, Reddit, or sites rather, like Twitter and Reddit. You actually think those are even for older kids, that we maybe would say no to those.
Right, because there really is very little supervision or guidelines on what can be posted on Twitter or Reddit. And really, I think for parents, as I said in the beginning, it's trying to keep up with the things that are constantly evolving. And so having a site like Common Sense Media that has a lot of guidelines, and that's where I pulled the guidelines for Snapchat off of Common Sense Media. So having resources, I mean, now even more so than when my kids were younger, I was trying to figure out, like, how do you get, based on your phone carrier, how do you get restrictions? How can you shut off the phone without actually having to physically take it? So there's things that you can do, get information, so to really use those information sources. The other thing is also having your young people, have screen-free time, right? Because the skill is actually called self-soothing, right? It's, as infants, we call it self-soothing when they learn to just look at their environment around them. They don't need to be stimulated all the time. And we do it as adults now, right? I'm in line somewhere, I pull my phone out, I scroll through something, instead of just what you would have done years ago is you just stood there, or you struck up a conversation with someone, or you just thoughts in your head, and had time and space to yourself. So
you
the
read
more
the tabloids at the grocery store.
have downtime. Right.
Yeah. I mean, but no, I actually feel, I can feel it, that, and the New York Times just did an article about that when we come home and we think we want to relax and take a break, and that means laying on the couch and looking at your phone. But if you really pay attention, you can feel anxious after that, or you feel worse. And that if we instead move into a flow state by making something, doing a craft, taking a walk, we can feel actually better. It helps our mental health. So just from a mental health perspective, the teens being on their phone all the time, is it safe to say you would link that to why we're seeing such a rise in anxiety and depression in our young people too?
We are absolutely seeing rises in anxiety and depression, right? You know, I say all the time, what social media does is it creates a lot of social comparison. Oh, look, that person's wearing a much better outfit than I own, or wow, that family's car is better than my car. I mean, it creates all this social comparison, and inevitably in social comparison, it just makes you feel worse about yourself and your own circumstances. So the more we can just have breaks, and I'm realistic, we're not going to eliminate this. We're not going to be able to say, no, you're never going to be on your phones, but to just take some breaks and have some downtime, to just have a conversation with someone without, pulling your phone out and, now being distracted by your phone. And this goes for adults too. I mean, there are like commercials where the parents on vacation, yet they're on their phone all the time. And the child's saying, well, I thought we were going to be on vacation from these things. You want me to put my phone down. So, and that's for all of us, myself included, where we have to be role models and take breaks.
Yeah, and the other thing that that you want kids to know is, so often they go back and go, gosh, you're right. Or they might not say you're right, but they know that they've made a big mistake. But even if they put something that looks okay, and I always tell my kids, and you had said this is a good thing too, that, hey, I always tell my kids, if you don't want your principal to read it, if you don't want it to be on the front page of the New York Times, don't put it online, because that's where it could end up. But you say that also people could post things that are normal, but then someone else could cut them, paste them, put it around, and you don't even have control what someone does to it after it's online.
Right. And there's a lot of these apps. Snapchat's one of them, has all sorts of filters, right? So you can do a filter that makes you look like a cat. There was like some online viral thing early on in the pandemic where a man was in a business meeting and somehow there was a filter on the screen that made him look like a cat. And he was like getting all the feedback, like, you look like a cat. He's like, I don't even know how to take this off. Right. So and some of these filters, they can make you look like a pig, and you can have a pig nose. Right. And then that picture gets taken and it gets sent to other people. And then you feel embarrassed. I mean, you meant it to be funny, but now people think you have a pig nose. Right. Things can get twisted so easily. And young people are sensitive, as they should be. There's so much development going on intellectually, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that things can be damaging very easily. And because of that sensitivity, you just never know what's going to negatively affect someone.
So this is where it gets tricky. What if we haven't been as strict as maybe we would like to be now? And it's like, oh, I got to go backwards. How do you deal with, because also psychologists will say, pick your battles, focus more on positive reinforcement. But so anytime you want to take the phone away or anytime you want to put limits on it, it's a big battle. So how do we navigate that?
It is a huge battle. And I've had parents say to me, I'm afraid of my child, or they've threatened to kill themselves if I take their phone away. And I mean, I think that those are real emotions and sentiments. It feels like the world is ending when when your lifeline, your phone is, a part of who you are. So it's trying to monitor things a little bit, have some downtime, okay, this is a phone-free half hour, just put your phones away. So I'm generally not a proponent of going from one extreme to the other. So just trying to cut back a little bit is a better way to go than saying you're not going to have your phone at all today. To just cut back, with young people, we doing some screen-free time where they just have to like read a book or do a craft or go on a walk. I mean, we used to have kids that would come home from school, do a little homework, and then just go outside to play, right? And that's really gone away, a lot of that downtime and free time, because there's so much sort of self-stimulation and entertainment going on.
I really wish schools would all become phone free, but I know some are and some are not. So let's just, in our last little bit of time together, I want to give parents sort of a checklist. Number one, just knowing about this, talking about it, telling our kids some of the risks, even though they're rolling their eyes and act like they're not listening to you, it really can make a difference.
It absolutely makes a difference. And I think communication is really key here. As I said, often I would ask questions about like, what are your friends doing? Because they don't want to reveal what they're doing, but I would ask trends about friends. I'm a big proponent of talking to other parents and finding out from parents like, hey, what's going on with your kid, or what are your concerns? Because you get a lot of good information that way. And then you can say to your child, hey, I heard that, Sally is on this social media app? Have you ever used that? And so it's getting corroborating information. Sometimes your teens, especially your younger teens, are not the best historians.
Yeah. And then making a rule that you cannot post your location. You think that's super important?
Yeah, I think that's a safety issue, safety and security. Yeah. And again, you're 18, 19 years old and you want to let people know where you are. But I don't really know that people need to know where you are on a regular basis. If you want to connect with someone, you say, hey, this is my location. Do you want to meet me here? But that's a much more purposeful and mindful way to connect with someone, as opposed to just, and I've seen it, when these snap maps get pulled up, you can just see dots all over the place and you realize, oh my goodness, we know where all these people are.
Watching the clock, making sure that there's some screen time rules. Do you advocate a contract?
You can do a contract. I think it's sometimes setting a timer. So many of these things can be just a time suck. It just sucks away your time.
Yeah.
And again, it happens to adults too. Like, oh my God, I've just lost an hour and I don't even know what I was doing. I have nothing to account for my time. Whereas reading a book, you can account for your time. You just read something, you have some knowledge and information, you're building your reading stamina. So it's setting timers, setting some limits, doing things in a modified way, not an all or nothing way.
I mean, TikTok for sure. It sucks. And as an adult, I'm not on it a lot, but I know that is the app of choice for my kids. And I guess part of it, just even knowing what they're seeing, because once you've mentioned that before, taking a cleanse, if they're going to be on it, once they start watching something that's that the algorithm knows they like, and it could be kind of really upsetting to them, they're just going to get more of it.
Right. And that's that. I mean, there's been some things that we've done around, the government trying to get access to some of these algorithms, because those algorithms are meant to be, visually and emotionally stimulating to keep you hooked in. And then they slip in ads and they slip in other things. But those algorithms, and you might look at a video and say, oh, this is, not something that I wish to look at again. But now the algorithm picks up that you actually looked at it for X number of seconds, and now we'll send you more of that content. Yes. So some of those algorithms that can be very, very dangerous, and they're meant to be like the arm of a slot machine. It's meant to kind of keep you hooked in, and really it gets your hormones flying so that you are now emotionally hooked into something, and it is hard to put down.
We're out of time right now, but thank you, Dr. Laura Saunders, who always gives us some great wisdom from the Institute of Living in Hartford. And I know they can now follow you on Instagram at Dr. L. Saunders. And, just having these conversations, I would suggest you want to listen to this show or this podcast, maybe at least with your partner. Maybe your teens will listen to a few minutes of it. But thank you for backing us up as parents and giving us some parameters.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
And for more information, you can follow me at Kara Sundlin. Have a great day and be well.